Theo, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Nassos. Great to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you on. You were just telling me beforehand now that you've come from your workshop where you were trying to avoid breaking a very expensive piece of machinery. Tell me what you've been up to earlier today.
Yes, it's a constant struggle that has lasted the last 8 months and will probably continue for the remainder of the company's life. But we've just been essentially making components to prove that we can on our equipment, because what we're all about is automating this particular piece of equipment.
So tell me, what's the 30-second pitch for Cloud.NC? What do you guys do? If you were explaining it to someone in a bar, what would you say?
Sure. So I would say that there is this machine. It's called the Cnc Milling Machine, and very few people have ever seen these or heard of them before, and yet they are responsible for the manufacture of more than $100 billion worth of components every single year. They make everything from iPhone bodies to jet engine turbine blades, injection molded plastic components, bits of car, aircraft, absolutely everything. And right now, there's a very big problem with these machines. And how they work is they're essentially very powerful robot arms that carve blocks of metal into useful shapes with spinning cutting tools. And the issue is that they should be automatic, but they are not. Today, if I want to use one, it's not like walking up to a 3D printer and just plugging in a 3D file and pressing go. What I must actually do is hand my 3D file to a very highly skilled human operator called a machinist, who will then use their years of experience to figure out how to cut that block of metal into your final component. This can take anything from 20 minutes to more than 100 hours. And then once that program has been generated and given to the machine, what we typically find is the components are being made less than half as fast as they theoretically could be. Because it's very hard to figure out how to cut a block of metal into a shape when you have a trillion ways of doing it. So that means two things. If I want to make 1 unit of something with this process, it's more than 10 times as expensive as it should be. If I want to make 1,000 units, it's still more than twice as expensive as it should be. And we are essentially building software that completely automates this task. You just give our software a 3D file, tell it what machine and tools you have, and then we run a vast artificially intelligent mathematical optimization trying to find the fastest way of making that part. This takes minutes rather than hours, no skill versus years of experience, and when you get your output, the program that the machine will use to cut the part, much, much faster than what I would be able to come up with just by thinking about it.
And so when you think about your vision for the company and what you hope to do playing out, how does the world look different when Cloud.NC has achieved what it wants to achieve? What do you hope to see?
Sure. Well, if in 10 years' time we achieve everything that we want, and that's a big if, the way the world would look. If I want to buy a component, say something like this, then I would be able to simply upload a 3D file to a web service. I'll get a price instantly, regardless of how many components I want. I'll get instant automatic design for manufacturability analysis, and I should be able to get either 1 or 10,000 components of that in 1 to 10 days. And I just don't need to worry about it. I never need to talk to a factory. It is smooth, it's simple, it's like using Amazon. Now, getting from what we have today to that is just immensely challenging. There are so many technological and market barriers in the way. If I actually wanted to buy that off a factory, really I'd probably have to email 100 factories to find 7 that would be interested and able to do it, and then it would be a 6-week lead time. So we're a very long way from that today.
And so what are the parts that you brought along with you today? Like I said before, I was delighted when I saw you brought something physical so that people can see exactly what it is in a world where so many things are intangible.
Yes, well, these actually aren't that interesting. They are just things that we designed to test our software. This is a very old one. We call it Tabasco because we used to name our parts after hot sauces for some reason. And this one is a little hydraulic component with an edge clamp on it. Again, although this looks simpler, it's actually much harder than that because it's got things that need to be cut on almost every single side.
Okay. Does that have a hot sauce name as well?
That one I think is called Sriracha.
Very nice, very nice. How many others do you have? How big is the range of hot sauces? How big are we talking? Is it super international?
It's getting there. I think that we've done 40 or 50 parts that we've actually given names to so far. But I think this one, Tabasco, is the original and it is the best.
Good to hear. So cycling back to when you started Cloud.NC, tell me a little bit about the thoughts that you had in mind in terms of taking on entrepreneurship as a career path, so the decision to apply to EF, etc. What were you thinking? What was going through your head?
Sure. Well, for me at least, I think entrepreneurship was always going to be the default path. It was never a decision process. It just happened, and it felt completely natural as it did happen. Going and working for a corporation, applying for jobs and things like that, that was the thing that felt unnatural. So when I came across this concept and when I managed to find EF, it was just the most obvious thing to do. It was a 1-second decision process to apply to and join EF.
And talk to me about the process of finding your co-founder. So were you looking for specific qualities when you came onto the program in terms of who the kinds of people that you wanted to work with? And how did the whole process unfold of you and I believe it's Chris working together?
Yes. So I didn't have a list. If anything, I really didn't know. I didn't have a clue who I was looking for. All I knew was that I had this problem. I didn't even really know how hard it would be technically to solve. And I just thought, hey, I'll pitch and I'll see who's interested. Now, as it happened, I'd actually met Chris 6 months before. He was doing EF4 whilst I was interviewing for EF5, and at the time we were both working on 3D printing ideas. And Alice just said, hey, you work on 3D printing, you work on 3D printing, you guys should talk. And so we did. And over that 6 months, I think we still have some of the Facebook conversations where I pitch him and we start talking about it, and we both think that this is much easier than it's ultimately going to be. So when the day came, the process of finding a co-founder took all of 15 seconds, and we've been working together ever since.
So there was something there before then.
Yes. We've had a slightly easier journey than most, I think.
So talk to me a little bit about the process of how you've kind of navigated growing the company with Chris, your co-founder. Did you have an idea pretty early on in terms of how you were going to sort of organize who took charge of what? And has that evolved at all since you've kind of started working together?
I'd say the split between the kinds of work we do was immediate and very, very natural. So Chris is 95% computer science and technology, and I am 95% manufacturing and business. And we overlap a little bit in the middle. So the roles were instantly obvious, and that has worked out extremely well for us. And I think it's very important that you have that broad coverage in a co-founding pair, someone with a lot of business acumen and someone with incredible computer science skills and some knowledge of the market in the middle. Because if you have that, you're constantly looking at all directions at all times, and it is very hard to be taken by surprise by some huge technical risk or some huge business challenge, and that will make your startup life an awful lot easier.
Speaking of the market, obviously a big part of building a business is making something that people want, making something that the market wants, solving a problem. What's been the main challenge that you found in sort of taking your technology and what you guys do at CloudNC to market?
Sure. So the first and largest challenge always remains building this technology is just phenomenally complex. If you go and look back at that first Facebook conversation Chris and I had, we thought that it was going to take 2 working years to get to the point where we will now be in 8 months. So we thought it would just take the 2 of us that little bit of time. Actually, it's taken a team of 14 software engineers 2.5 years, and we're not done yet. Wow. So the technical challenge is absolutely immense. But that is mostly solved now. The challenge, the other challenge we faced at the beginning was it was very difficult to convince factories to talk to us, because we had this totally wacky, zany idea. As far as most factories are concerned, it is the concept that this job could be automated is ludicrous, and it is almost ludicrous because it is so challenging for a computer to do. So finding factories who would talk to us, and furthermore finding factories who would talk to us and then talk to investors to say that, hey, we might be able to do it, and if we do, it will be incredible. That was very, very difficult. An awful lot of cold calls before we found some people who were willing to take a chance on us and back us. That was probably one of the biggest early challenges. In fact, we've only just hit the point where it is relatively simple to get introductions and be taken seriously by the manufacturing industry by virtue of being able to actually cut metal and having a working prototype. But that was a very long journey.
I want to come back to how you've expanded your team to basically develop this technology. But before we go into the hiring process, you were recently on stage with Reid Hoffman at the event that EF ran while came into London temporarily. Talk to me about that. Was there something that you took away from being on stage with Reid and being coached by him that kind of really stuck for you?
It was, I mean, hearing the answers to my questions from him directly, that was fantastic, because whilst I've listened to the Master of Scale podcast, you're always going to be left with some question you have which isn't answered there, and just being able to ask directly, oh wow, that was a great opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you have some time to hobnob with him afterwards, before and after the event?
Unfortunately not, he's a very busy man.
Maybe some other time, when Cloud NC is sold for many billions of dollars, hopefully. So Theo, you have now expanded the team to 14 software engineers to build your technology. What's the main thing that you've learned about the hiring process?
That it is absolutely crucial, and it is incredibly difficult. It is one of the most important things that you will do as a founder, possibly even the most important thing, assuming that you can gain funding to make those hires. Because ultimately, your company is its people. It's the people who build the product. If the people are wrong, everything will be wrong. And so for us, the start of the hiring process was quite difficult and painful. We've almost only hired software engineers so far, which falls mostly into the domain of my co-founder. And I think we interviewed people for maybe 3 or 4 months before we finally made that first hire. We were getting a little bit of pressure from our VCs and from our advisors, quite rightly saying, are your standards too high? We were very lucky that Chris didn't give in to my requests for hire someone, please, anyone at this point. But no, we stuck to it, and then we made our first hire, and that turned out incredibly well. And through that very painful process of finding that first person, we started to learn how to hire, and that is how to hire, how to recruit. That is a highly skilled profession all on its own. You should know a bit about how to do it as founders, but you should also be aware that you're going to hit the limits of your recruiting capability incredibly quickly. And the other thing I'd say is it is very, very difficult to hire for a startup if you don't have enough money and if you don't have interesting work. In order to make the absolute top quality hires you need to work in a deep tech company, you need to be able to pay really, ideally, above market average. For at least for software engineers, and really for everyone actually, but you need to be able to pay above market, even if it's just slightly, and you need incredibly interesting work. We were very lucky that we raised a large enough seed round to pay slightly above market, and also the work is absolutely fascinating algorithmic stuff. It's really, really good stuff to work on. When we tried to hire for roles that weren't that interesting, then suddenly we found that we were going an entire year without making a hire, and it was then that it became clear that we needed to bring someone in who was really, truly expert. And so we did. We brought on a head of talent, and that had the double whammy of massively improving our recruiting capability as an organization, and it took that workload off myself and my co-founder. And that's something that you must be seeking to do as a founder constantly. It is to automate yourself. You must run around all of these company things that are going to be in total chaos, and leave behind organization and automation as you go. And that is your constant job.
You touched on sort of the skill of recruiting, the skill of getting the right people. And for someone who hasn't, spent a lot of time hiring people, it might seem pretty obvious from the outside, as in just go and get the best people for the job. I mean, make sure they have the right skill set, make sure that you like them, and then do it. You mentioned that you sort of understood experientially from doing it that you get to a point where you reach the end of your limit. So what would those kind of, I suppose they must be quite intangible, but what were those aspects of recruiting that kind of surprised you that you weren't aware of that were involved in the process?
This is tough to think back to, because I haven't done it for been deeply involved for such a long time. What probably surprised us was firstly how incredibly difficult it was to find anyone, to convince anyone to come for a job interview with us. It was really hard. And then once we got good, how easy it was to find a certain class of software engineer that loves working on algorithmic problems, and how difficult it was to find the people that we thought would be easy to find. You can expect to be surprised by just how much more difficult it is to find certain people than you were expecting.
You mentioned when we were coming up the stairs to the interview room as well that you're in the middle of closing a funding round, or towards the end of it. What has been the main thing that you've learned about that process, having now done it a couple of times?
I don't know. I think we avoided a lot of mistakes in two ways. Firstly, by swatting up considerably, by reading everything we could get our hands on, and two, by having great advisors. I'd say that we avoid most mistakes that we've had a very easy journey as a startup. We haven't had that oh shit moment that is talked about constantly. We haven't had any of them so far, touch wood. And that's mainly because of what I talked about, where Chris and I, we both have that that 360-degree vision on the business, and we pair that with we are constantly talking to our advisors. We are very acutely aware that we are first-time founders. We've never done this before, and frankly, we have no idea what we're doing regarding most of this stuff. But what we have is an incredible network of advisors who we can go to at any time, day or night, about anything, and we talk to them on almost a daily basis. So I think that's one of your biggest roles as a CEO, is to be the focal point through which all of this incredible advice is deployed in the building of your business.
And how have you gone about cultivating those relationships with advisors? Did they come about by chance? Did you actively seek out people that you thought would be very valuable to give you that insight in the business? How did those kind of develop?
I'd say a tremendous amount of that came through EF. We had a very small network of advisors before EF. But EF set us up with Chris Mayers, who was our mentor and now sits on our board. And then we have anyone who we wish to speak to within EF, and there is tremendous expertise in all sorts of things here. We have our VCs, we have our other investors. I'd say 90% of our advisors have come through either EF or through our investors, or convergence of both.
So we've spoken a lot about, obviously, the process of what you've learned by building your business, you and Chris. What have you learned about yourself over the course of this journey building CloudNC? What have been the main things that you've learned?
I would make a terrible corporate employee. Absolutely awful. Can't sit still, can't do what I'm told. Have to be solving. If you're not solving problems, you're bored. So being given some kind of repeatable process to do, that's just not interesting at all. Creating a process, that is a lot of fun, but that has an end point, and then you need to move on to the next thing. And I think if you're an employee, you're not going to have that constant stream of incredibly complex problems where you have to relearn everything. You're not going to be, what are you doing as a founder? You need to figure out how to do everything to a basic level. You need a basis in for us, it's like technology and manufacturing and sales and marketing and law and PR and accounting and finance and so on and so on. Oh, and don't forget fundraising as well. You have to learn all of these things from scratch, and that is a very exciting journey.
And if you could go back in time and speak to yourself before you started, would there be anything specific that you'd say, any piece of advice?
Sleep more.
And on that note, I hope everybody watching will go and nod off and get some much needed Z's. Theo, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a real pleasure chatting.
Thank you, Nelson.